So we talked about copying objects from another Blender file into our own file. Now we're going to talk about copying objects within the file. So here I've got this simple teapot set up, okay, and we'd actually call it duplicating in Blender, not copying, but you know, that's just words. So if I was to select this teapot, there's actually three ways of duplicating, okay, and each has their own way of doing things, or their own quirks to them. The simplest way to just make a straight copy would be Shift and D for duplicate, and then I can drag this across and move, and you'll see that these are independent items. You know, they can be edited independently. So if I was to grab a vertex here, or a selection vertices here, and move them, the other object is completely independent. Okay. The second way of doing it is with Alt D rather than Shift D. So if I do Alt and D with this object and bring it across here, now when I go to edit it, you'll see that both are edited. And if I select I have to do it on the one that was previously selected. Let me see, this one is selected, this one isn't. But I have to select a vertex on here. I cannot select a vertex on here. But if I excuse me, if I select a vertex on here, and well, actually let's select a few, and now if I was to grab them, you see it affects both pots. Okay, so let me just do that proportional editing. So you see how it affects both pots at once. Okay, it doesn't affect the Shift D copy because this is its own instance. So let's get rid of the Shift D copy for a minute. Let's concentrate on these two. Okay, so if I was to edit this one, and for example if I was to just grab the handle there. I've grabbed a bit more than the handle. Let me just clean it up a bit. To clean up with this circle select, you use your middle mouse button, and that will deselect whatever's within the mouse. Let me just kind of clean this up a bit. See, middle mouse button, and that's it. So if I was to say grab this handle upwards, just, I don't know, something like that. Okay, but then if I wanted to make these two independent objects of each other so they don't edit together, I can come across to the data tab here, and where we've got this number 2, this 2 means the object data is shared between two objects. So to make them independent of each other, I just click on the 2, it disappears, and now when I edit this, it's its own object, and it doesn't affect the other. Okay, right. Let me Control Z back a couple of times, just get the shape back. Let me delete this. Let me move this kind of up a bit. A third way of duplicating objects is with an array modifier. So I'll come across the modifiers tab, and I'll get an array. We've got this panel here. Okay, now I can control the number of objects with the count 3, 4, 5. I could even go to 100 or more, I guess. This is going to lag out me because there's way too many. I think. Yep. No, it's there. So 100 teapots in a row. Okay. Let's put this down a bit. Let's say 5 teapots just to make it simple. Okay. We can also control the axis that these duplicate on. At the minute it's on the x-axis, you can see that's along the x. If I was to make that 0, and if I was to make that 1, we now duplicate duplicate our pots that way. And similarly, I can do that with the z-axis or the z-axis, and 5 teapots stacked on top of each other. Okay. Now there is an offset here. Let me go back to the x-axis, and this one on a relative offset, okay, it means that each teapot is generated exactly the same width as the object. Let's try this in bounding box view. It might be easier to explain. You see, it's now, well, it doesn't actually make it easier. Maybe if I apply it, it does. No, it doesn't. But anyway, what's happening here? Let's go back to solid view. Let's go there. 5. Each teapot starts where the last one ends. Okay. Now with the relatives offset, we could increase that distance. 1.512, whatever, or decrease it 0.8, and they will kind of overlap. Okay, so best way to explain it is the width of the bounding box. Where the bounding box ends, the next one starts. Okay, but we could also do it in a constant offset. So if we click the constant offset, let that off. Okay, if we wanted each teapot, Blender squares are 1 meter, so let's say if we wanted each teapot 3 meters apart, the origin of the next one will be 3 meters over. 3 meters actually isn't enough for this. Let's say 5, actually 7. What size is this teapot anyway? Let's have a look. It's oh, it's showing it because it's all it's showing it with the count, with the array. So 3.203 is the dimension of that teapot. So let's try that anyway. Let's count 2 and 3.203, wasn't it? 3.203. Okay. Not sure why that is. Because I've got a scale here. Let me apply scale. That make it easier. Apply scale. Shift A. No. Control A. And apply rotation and scale. Okay. Now my teapot is showing 3.203 with scale of 1. Let's try this again. And there we go. That's what I was expecting. Where the bounding box of the first one ends, the second one starts. Although it's all one object at this moment, so it's all one bounding box. Okay, we could do this. Let's go back to relative offset. Okay, if we use it on 2 axes, so that's 1, and we'll go. That's moved across 1 unit on the Y, and if we go 1 unit on the Z or the Z, okay, this teapot is spawned 1 unit or 1 bounding box over, I guess, 1 up and 1 to the left. Okay, so we can use these to generate as much as we want. Okay, let's move this back to 0 and 0. Okay, what happens when we edit this pot? Once again, with that selected by G, there it edits all of them, and it will in all of the array. Okay, if we look at the object data here, we've only got 1 object because the array is just copying that object until it's applied, and when it's applied it still becomes 1 object. So if we were looking to create a line of something but we wanted them independently editable, we would have two ways of doing it. We would either, firstly, we could use a Shift D and just create them across, okay? Or the second way, we'd have to do this, which is a little clumsy, but you know, if you're getting your spacing and everything right, we could apply this modifier. Okay, come into edit mode. We'll just select the linked on each one, and we'd separate that off with the P key, make it its own separate object. Okay, so now this is separate, these three are all one. We'd need to do the same all the way across, so L, 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 P to separate. Now you see this object is separate as well as this one. These two will still be joined because they're part of the array modifier. So those are the three ways to duplicate objects within your file. Let me just delete this for a second. Delete these two. Select this one again. Supposing we wanted a stack of modifiers. Well, actually, that is true, although it wasn't what I meant to say. A stack of teapots. So if we use an array modifier here, and we duplicated it, let's say 5 times on the x-axis. What we could then do is add another modifier, another array modifier. This time, instead of the x-axis, we would want, let's, ooh, got that wrong. Okay. Instead of the x-axis on the bottom of the stack, we could use a second modifier on the y-axis. Okay, let's make that 5 again. We could also add another modifier, another array modifier, and this time we could stack them on the z or the z-axis, and we can stack them 5 high, or 10 or 100 high, whatever you like. Okay, and that's how we could make kind of like a cubic array of things. So those are the ways to duplicate objects in Blender. So you got your Shift D, which makes it its own instance. You got your Alt D, which means that when you edit it, it'll edit every other instance of that object until you make it its own instance in the data tab, which will be there. And you've got an array modifier.